You hit what you aim at. And if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. Zig Ziglar. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Millennial Experiment, where we are dedicated to becoming the best versions of ourselves by learning, creating, cultivating, and of course, experimenting. We look at Millennial Experiment as not only a podcast, but a hub of resources for all things millennial. We're both learning, discovering, growing in our lives, and we hope you're doing the same. We want to be able to share and help you throughout your journey as we take our journey in life. Life is about experimenting, testing, and pushing ourselves to become the best versions of ourselves. In this episode, we are very honored, excited to have the one and only Gabrielle Bosche. She is an author, entrepreneur, CEO, and founder of the Millennial Solution, and most importantly, a millennial.
Yeah, Gabrielle Bosche, also called America's Millennial Expert at 28, has written 3 books and started her own company, the Millennial Solution, which works to help companies, among so many other things that it does, engage and retain millennials. They focus on what keeps us and what makes us want to quit, and helps to reconcile generations in the workforce, or as Gabrielle would say, generational reconciliation. She has brought her expertise to some of the top companies in the world, including Microsoft, Audi, Northrop Grumman, Volkswagen, PNC, U.S. Department of Education, and the Navy. She's the real deal, the Millennial Mythbuster. In this special interview, Gabrielle gives us her take on the millennial generation, myth-busts and debunks a few of the stereotypes of our generation, gives us some awesome insight into how we can become better leaders and have more influence, and to finish it off, she gives us a great experiment to help us organize our life and take some action. Enjoy, and remember to leave us a review and like us on Instagram and Facebook at Millennial Experiment. Keep on experimenting, fellow millennials.
So we are going to start this off with a question that we're going to ask all of our guests, especially pertaining to the millennial generation. And the question is, what do you think of when you hear the word millennial?
What do I think of? Man, there's so many mixed emotions. I think of probably the first time I heard the term millennial. I remember being in college and researching our generation, trying to figure out why we were so different. That's when people were still calling us Gen Y. And we decided that was a terrible name. And we're like, we're actually going to go by millennial. Thanks so much, though. And I just remember like being really relieved that there was like actually like a group of people that I could associate with, people who loved, justice, who were passionate about making a difference, who, really enjoyed and celebrated youth. And so when I think of the word millennial, I definitely think about a group of individuals who embrace the season of life that we're in and are really excited and really ready to make a difference.
That's an awesome answer. Nice. I was thinking usually like we're asking it and then people say, entitled, lazy, but you got it. Okay. So like we mentioned in the intro here that you run a company, it's called the Millennial Solution. So can you just talk about that for a second and talk about what the main goal of your consulting business is?
I started the Millennial Solution about 5 years ago, mostly because I was so tired of people saying exactly that, as millennials are entitled and they're lazy and they're just horrific to employ and or work with. And that wasn't my experience at all. I mean, I by no means had this, rosy picture of my generation. I think, with any generation, you take the good and with the bad. But I saw that my generation was not only being underutilized, but frankly ignored by many in leadership in the government, in major corporations, and in the nonprofit sector. So I started my company to be able to help leaders understand who our generation is and to really help reconcile a lot of the differences that are frankly, silly and ridiculous, but, for whatever reason, have really stopped many of us from being taken seriously in the workforce.
I love that. I'm curious, going into these companies, kind of talking upward to previous generations like baby boomers, what was your strategy in that to be able to gain some credibility with these leaders of these companies?
Yeah. Well, I don't really know if I'd technically be a millennial if I had, like a strategy for world domination, right? It kind of just, the doors really just did open. I will tell you that there was a moment and there was a moment for me to be able to step up and be confident in what I could bring to the market, or I could have, ignored it and waited for permission to really take my platform. And it was just, a run-of-the-mill day. I was, speaking with some people at this networking event at a friend's house. And this woman asked me, what do you do? And at the time I was actually working as a fundraiser for a nonprofit. But instead of saying what I got paid to do, I said who I really am. And I said, I'm an expert in millennials, and did not believe myself at all as I said it. But apparently she believed me. And she goes, oh, wow, well, my organization could really use you, having zero idea where she worked. I was like, oh, well, where do you work? And she goes, the Navy. I was like, oh of the United States, right? Like I was so confused. And so that was my first client, was the Navy. And I've been on about 7 different naval bases and had the opportunity to work really closely with some of their top leadership. And it's been a crazy wild ride. But I wouldn't be, frankly, where I am now if I didn't take that moment. It wasn't, it wasn't glorious. It wasn't, really highlighted in any sort of way. It was just a normal moment that when I was asked who I am, rather than shrinking back, I just said who I really am, which is an expert in millennials.
I think about that a lot. I think about that's how I want to be asked. I don't want to silo myself in what I do, more so who I am. So that's a really good, important point for, I think, a lot of people to take away, is when they're having those conversations, telling who they are first, and instead of telling like what they do and siloing themselves in that specific category.
For sure. And also a takeaway would be that, like you said, you started this huge business based off of something that wasn't like this big holy grail event. Like a lot of people think like at the end of graduation or end of college, you have the graduation, or you have this point in your life where you're going to realize like, oh, wow, I know what I'm going to do forever. And you don't really, it's just, you put yourself in those positions like you did, and then you grow from there. So I think that's awesome. So can you give us an example? Like if you go to the Navy and your goal there is to talk to the previous generations and tell them how they can relate better to millennials. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of my time working with executive level leaders and managers to help them understand what makes our generation tick. And it's more than just my opinion, although I'll tell you that being a millennial coming in to explain who we are is surprisingly this, like novice thing for them. They're like, oh, you're a millennial talking about your generation. We're used to, old people. They don't say that, but they're used to older people, coming in and explaining how their peers can relate to us, which is, wholeheartedly ironic. But I spend a lot of my time helping them understand, a lot of the data, like my company, like I've done research on millennials for 11 years, which makes me feel real old saying that out loud. But I think you guys relate to this is I want to know why, right? I don't need to know the opinions. I don't need to know what you think about it. That's, fine and great, but I want to know the data. And that's really where it all started, is I just wanted to know, who we were and how to translate that information into strategies that both us as millennials and, other generations can use to make a difference.
Yeah, that's, I think, really important is knowing that data. Since you're the expert in debunking or you're expert in millennial, I figured you'd try to debunk some of these stereotypes. Are millennials entitled?
I think entitlement is a perspective. So I use this example a lot. So if you were to go to, just like a hotel conference room and you walked in and it was the middle of July and there's no air conditioning, you would probably feel fairly entitled to air conditioning, right? But if you were to walk into a hut in some, sub-Saharan, African village where you knew that they didn't have access to electricity and you expected air conditioning, you would come across as, extremely entitled. And I think entitlement is really based off of our expectations. I think our generation is labeled entitled because our expectations may not always be consistent with reality. We have an expectation that we're going to make more money right out of school because, well, let's be honest, we were told we were going to make more money out of school, right? We have an expectation that we're going to be taken seriously by our bosses because our parents have always taken us seriously. So this idea or this myth of entitlement is truly a myth because it's their perspective. But I think more than anything else, rather than having an entitlement discussion, I think we need to be having an expectations discussion.
Yeah, that's true. And we talked about this in an original podcast or one of our previous podcasts. And I think that the generation that raised us to be or to have self-confidence and to challenge the status quo and to have high expectations. And now it seems like that same group of people is turning around and just saying like, well, why are you acting so entitled? It's like, that's what you told me to do.
Right. I know. It's the ultimate irony. One of my favorite quotes is by this parenting expert from the 50s, Chaim Greenough, and he says, we often criticize the next generation as if we had nothing to do with creating them, which is, completely ridiculous because you're right. I think a lot of it is just very well intentioned from our parents, but I think unfortunately for many of us, that's really hamstrung many of us from making a big difference.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, jeez. So, okay, the next one. So, these are the two biggest ones. And so you did a great job. I mean, I think those are phenomenal answers. And I think a lot of our listeners will be super excited to hear that perspective so that they can tell their parents they're not entitled.
It's because it's their fault, right?
Yeah, exactly. You say, your fault, Mom and Dad. So again, I think it is a perception of this one too, but we're perceived as a lazy generation, or we're trying to come up with shortcuts, or we're trying to skip from A to C and right over B. So what do you think about the all of us are lazy?
Well, I don't think it's the laziness component. I think working towards a goal is, that's a human thing. I think what you did hit on is particularly interesting, and we are the need for speed generation. We want to, put it in the microwave and get done in 60 seconds. And because of that, again, it's so much of it is based off of our expectation, right? Is that everything moves so quickly, that we relay that expectation that everything moves quickly into the workforce, into relationships, into societal change. And I think we have a really low level of patience for transformation. And on one side, I think that can be dangerous because it can make us come across as, kind of like that spoiled brat, like I want everything now. But on the other side, I think it's really healthy for us because we just can't help but question societal norms. We have to question, why are things done this way? We have to question, is there a better way? Or, frankly, is there an app for that, right? Which there usually is. So so I think it's really a good thing that we do seek to find a faster road to a good or an approved solution, because I mean, frankly, our parents just telling us that's how we've always done it isn't good enough, and it's not good enough for our generation. But frankly, it's just not good enough for us as a society.
This is true.
I get a lot of that. I work in the corporate America world, and just questioning like the processes and the things that the way that people do things is really important to me from an efficient standpoint. And it often comes across that, I'm trying to take shortcuts, or when really I'm just trying to better improve the process. If I were to get something done in a faster amount of time, well, no, you should have been spending at least 4 hours on this thing. And it kills me because it's like, why are you taking so long to do one thing when you could do it in 20 minutes,
Totally. It's so arbitrary. And we feel that same way about promotions as well, is, okay, cool. So I have to work for 2.5 years because that's what it says. But what if I can actually show, right? If I can demonstrate that I deserve it, shouldn't that be rewarded as well? So I think in that regard, millennials are actually more merit-based than any other generation. Because unlike other generations who are saying, well, check this box, move from A to B to C, we're saying, well, if I can demonstrate that I have a level of expertise and execution, shouldn't that be enough? And that's why millennials are even disrupting the higher education system, is because we're saying, that's great. You're saying I need to go through 4 years of a university and get a degree. Well, the majority of our generation has already done that, and they're $38,000 in debt. So we're like, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, totally. And even a bigger picture too, I think we're changing the complete flow of our careers that we don't, I mean, if you could put a stereotype to the previous generation, it was, hopefully you went to college, but if not, you got the job at the place and you moved up the corporate ladder till you got to 60, 65 or whatever, you get the pension, the gold watch, and you're like, peace out. I mean, that's how it was before. But for us, it's like, we're switching jobs every 2-3 years, trying to get to where we want, to where we're the most happy and we can be the most productive without having these handcuffs to us all the time.
Well, exactly. And that made more sense for that economy as well. You have to think back to how quickly industries have changed. I mean, now we don't have industries that rise and fall on consistent work. We now have the gig economy, which has completely disrupted traditional workflow, and we have people coming in and out of industries and in and out of economies, and it's more global than ever. So it's, the traditional factory line worker is being replaced by a much more, interactive and a much more global approach to employment, which is very much reflective, I think, of what our generation wants and expects from work. Is we want flexibility, we want an experience more than a job, and frankly, we want to have a personal connection with our work. And millennials don't just want those things, we're actually demanding them. And that, I think, is the big difference between our generation and others in the past, is those other generations wanted the same exact things, but they just were too afraid to ask.
So true. So can you give us an example? So we know, and for our audience, we can tell them that by about the year 2020, we're going to make up 50% of the workforce in America. So you're focused on this, obviously, with talking to your companies and government agencies. So give us a little sneak peek into what you talk about. Like, what are some of the ways that a company can hire and retain some millennial employees, and how that's different from previous generations?
Yeah, just lots of free beer, and that'll typically do it, right?
Beanbags, ping pong.
Totally. Yeah, maybe a rock wall here or there. That would
I've been trying to do that with my company, and it's just not working out.
It's not working. You just gotta be more aggressive.
I'll just bring the beer to work.
It's not hard. It really isn't. I mean, millennials, again, we want the same thing everybody else wants, but we want to have clarity. I think millennials demand more clarity than other generations in our career. either. We don't do well with ambiguity. Other generations were like, yeah, get the job and then you'll kind of figure it out as you go along. Millennials like, that does not work for us. Like, I need to have, a step-by-step instruction of what I'm supposed to do next. And I want to know where I stand, because we're the feedback generation. So, there are really simple and really easy things that companies can and should do. Like onboarding programs are like the worst ever right now, because you work for a company and they give you an employee handbook and say, hey, welcome to the company. That's where the bathroom is. This is how many weeks of vacation you get. Mm-hmm. And, there's no orientation to the culture itself. It's basically just, an orientation to the office. So, I think onboarding programs are really going to need a huge reboot, because it's like the first date with the company. And I think most companies are screwing it up. So I don't really think it's that difficult to comprehend why millennials are willing to move on every 2 to 3 years when they're not having a great first impression.
Oh, I love that.
That's true.
The first date perspective in an interview is so true, because I don't know. I feel like a lot of people, when they go into an interview, the company is asking all these questions. But I've noticed that, as I go into interviews, just wanting to know more about the company and what kind of culture it's going to be like is so important to me now versus in previous interviews when I first graduated college, right? I want to know what the culture is like. I want to know what they're about and how I'm going to, be when I get on board, versus just like this one way interrogation of me. And then hopefully I'll just like it. Right. So
it's like being on the first date and then they have the list of like, okay, how many kids do you want? When do you want to get married? Right. And like that. Instead of just like having a conversation. I love that. I like that. Do you say that in your speeches? That's good.
Okay, I'll do it now, just because you suggested it.
Yes.
So on this topic, and actually a little sidetrack, how can we as millennials be better leaders and have more influence?
Just like you, Gabrielle.
Just how can we? Yeah, let's pause for a second. How can we be like you? That's our real question. Sorry, I should have just said that.
Everyone should have red hair. We do need more gingers in the world, but
my mom has red hair, so
it's a recessive gene, dude.
I know. Preservation, man. It's really not that hard. I think the biggest hang up that our generation has, and I think it's something that we never talk about, is respect. And I think our generation demands respect from everybody else. We expect, our parents or our bosses or even our friends to change their preferences to appeal to us, but we refuse to change our priorities and how we express ourselves as well. So that's what I can say, serving thousands of employers and working with thousands of millennials themselves, that's the biggest disconnect. And frankly, that's a big reason that employers don't want to hire us, is because they see us as disrespectful, even though, we aren't trying to come across that way. We're like, we're just trying to make this better. But, our need for disruption is too oftentimes seen as disrespectful. So I would say just taking ownership of that and consciously saying, I really respect you, hey, I want to learn from you, hey, I love what you've been able to do and what you've been able to build over your lifetime. And I really see a lot of value in that. There are really simple and really basic things that we can start to do, say, and reflect on, that I think will very quickly improve our status as leaders. And it bothers me so much when people always say we're the leaders of tomorrow, like we're still like in kindergarten or something. Yeah. I'm like, no, we're getting married, we're having kids, we're building businesses, we're running for office. We're not some future hypothetical age group anymore. We're here. Like, we've arrived. Like, we've been here for a long time, actually. So that I think we'll start being treated more like the adults in the room rather than being sat at the kiddie table when we start to show respect.
That's good. I actually have a few examples in my life. I could probably be better about that for sure. Yeah, we come in and it's like, it's like you just want to hold their face and you're like, but I know that I can do this better and faster. And you just like, instead of just saying, I appreciate that you started this business 30 years ago and what you've gotten into, like, let me help you take it to the next level type of thing.
Totally.
That's super important. I think everybody should rewind it and listen to that again.
Do you think it's Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go.
Do you think it's important for us not to be siloed? And what I mean by that is, do you think it's important at least I think it's important to have my knowledge and learning grow in everything that I do, in every subject, whether it's like finance, health, fitness, leadership, all those things. Do you think it's important for us to really take charge in all of these categories in order to have that influence, or instead of like focusing on one thing? Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. I mean, I think millennials naturally are quite the Renaissance generation. I don't think we've been able to help it. So whereas other generations maybe could pick one particular, mode of operations from, a career standpoint, we've essentially diversified our entire lives. And technology has made that seamless transition between, work life, personal life, spiritual life, relationships, etc., quite seamless. So absolutely. I mean, I think millennials will naturally do that. And I don't think that we really consciously or unconsciously categorize, our lives too much. I think we just kind of put it all in a smoothie and see what happens.
Jamba juice.
It's so good. So we'll have like one more question here, and then we'll have our final questions that we ask all of our guests here. But you've been doing this for 5 years. I'm sure you're looking more towards the future as well. What does the future of the Millennial solution look like?
Yeah, it looks like a whole lot more millennials doing what I'm doing. And that's been the cool journey, really, is, having studied millennials for so long. I mean, I wrote my first book about millennials when I was 17.
Wow,
It's been a crazy, crazy journey. It's not good. Don't read it. But
which one is
I'm not even going to tell you, because then you're going to buy it. You're like, she was right.
You're right.
I don't even think I knew how to
good.
write at 17.
I know. What the heck, dude?
It wasn't good, but A for effort, right? So
Yes.
I'm excited about basically just cloning myself because, and I've just expanded a whole bunch. We've got trainers across the country, and to be able to help people who are passionate about generational reconciliation actually have a context and a vehicle for that is really exciting for me. So, but it's crazy. I mean, we've got, different, technological platforms that we're launching. We've got like a new. We've just got so much stuff going on that I'm definitely really excited for the future, and I feel more and more like a millennial every day. Like, as my company expands, I'm like, I have so much ADD when it comes to running a company, which I think, millennials are super entrepreneurial as it is. I think we all, whether we actually have our own company or not, we all think that way. We don't think just, I have this one thing, I have this one job, this is my one way of making money. Many of us, we've been required to side hustle and moonlight and figure it out as we go along. I certainly did. And now that I have my own company, I'm like, I'm side hustling on my own company. Like, I don't know whether to be mad or impressed. So who knows?
You know what else to do, right?
I love it. The side hustle.
That's fantastic. Yep. All right, so we'll move into the final questions. So this is a kind of a fun one, and it can be serious or something silly that you want to get out there. But the question is, if you could make a social media post and you knew it would go viral, what would you say?
Yeah, see, when you guys sent that over to me, I was like, what does that even mean? Because if I knew how to make it go viral, I would have already done it by now, right?
Well, yeah, I know. It's hypothetical.
Just pretend
right?
like a billion people were all listening to you on social media right now.
Right now. There you go.
So what,
you have a billion followers.
What would you say? Would you post a selfie, or would you like...
You're like, because you're probably vain enough to post a selfie.
I did not mean it, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea. It'd probably like be something inspirational, like talking about, how they have like the power within them to like do something great and awesome. Like that's what I spend a lot of my time on social media. I don't know if y'all like follow me on Instagram or not, but it's a lot of times like posting cool like quotes. And I honestly think of inspirational quotes constantly. And I'm not like, oh, I'm so cool. It's just, I think I surround myself with, I'm basically brilliant. No, but I surround myself with things that inspire me. And, I've learned long ago that when you're going through something, that lesson isn't usually just for you. It's usually for you to think, comprehend, process, and share with others. So I've just kind of made it a habit of when I have like an aha moment, I turn it into a meme and I post it on Instagram.
That's good. Yeah, give us one of those quotes. I mean, do you have any in particular that you are a go-to quote, or maybe just one that you shared recently?
Yeah, one of the ones I've been saying a lot to some of the people who I've been kind of mentoring and talking to is this idea of changing your physical environment to change your mental environment. And I'm, self-described, wanderlust. I love traveling. I'm on a plane pretty much once a week just because of the work that I get to do. But I can tell you every single kind of profound thought or conclusion or clarity I've gotten on what I'm working on has happened when I've left my norm. And sometimes that's extreme, like moving somewhere, and seeing what comes of it. Or sometimes it's just a weekend away or a hike. But I think when you're stuck in a rut, the best thing you can do is get out of it, and you have that choice. You have the choice to change your physical environment. And just by doing that, you'll be amazed at how quickly you'll get a lot of clarity on some of the situations that you're going through.
All right, I'm moving out of the country. That's it.
You have no choice.
I'm quitting.
You don't have to move there. You just have to be there, right? You have to change your physical environment. I think Tony Robbins is big on that, actually. If people listen to him, he's big on that physical environment thing, I'm pretty sure. If you guys know who that is.
He stole it from me, for sure.
Yeah, oh, no doubt. Yeah, is that baby boomer stealing stuff, I'm telling you. So now I'm going to ask you a question that you ask all of your interviewees.
Yeah.
What would your 12-year-old self think of you now? Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
Sweet.
You did. And it's so funny. I started asking people that, I don't even know, just at the beginning of my podcast, because I think it's hilarious, and it probably isn't. Most people who are on my show are like, why are you asking me this? It's very strange.
No, you get it.
But yeah, I know. I think she would be very excited that orthodonture actually worked, because I just had the most messed up teeth ever, and I just remember thinking like, please tell me that it's gonna work out for me one day, and it did. It was just 6 years later I finally got them off. But I think she would be very surprised that I have my own company, because I never would have thought that I would have gone into the entrepreneurial space. But everything else really would have made a lot of sense. Everything from like me being involved politically to me living in DC, to me even having my own podcast. I think she would be thinking, yeah, that made sense. So I think she probably would want more like glitter eyeshadow. I think that's probably a preference of hers. But unfortunately, 2004 is no longer here. So
the high school dances.
Oh, I know.
The glitter, so good.
All the glitter, all of it.
Oh my gosh, we found out when we first talked that we actually, all three of us grew up. We don't live anywhere near each other now. I'm Northern California, Nolan's Southern California, and you're in DC at this point. Yeah. We actually all grew up within 10 miles of each other.
Oh yeah, I know, like hanging out at the Sunrise
hilarious.
Mall.
Oh my gosh,
I should take a bus to the Sunrise Mall. That's because I moved. I came from the Choville, Rancho Cordova. I didn't have the luxury of having someone chauffeur me to the Sunrise Mall.
Oh wow, those are the good old days, man. The good old days.
That's awesome.
So we're the Millennial Experiment, and so experimenting is part of what we do and what we're trying to get our audience to do to improve themselves, better themselves. Do you have an experiment that our audience could help, or that you could give our audience to help break the normal routine, or anything millennial related?
Yeah. I started doing this about 6 months ago, and it's really helped me. A couple of things. So I single task my days, which has been really helpful. I know not everyone can do that if they have like a regular boss type thing, but when you have so much stuff to do, I just single task. So like Mondays are like my accounting and finance day. So if I like need to pay rent or like take care of bills or whatever, I do that on Mondays. Like Tuesdays and Thursdays are business development days. So those are my meetings. That's when I'm making sales calls. And Wednesday and Friday are content development days. So if I've got a blog post to do, or, I'm recording my show, or I need to write an article, I do those on those days. And single tasking has really helped me take control out of a time in my life where there's so many things going on that it can quickly come out of control. So I would really challenge your listeners to see what things can you single task. I think many of us, single task our workouts, like leg day or, arm day or cardio or whatever.
Yeah, we got that figured out.
Yeah. So why not take that same approach to the stuff that actually matters?
Yeah, especially that actually matters. Working out does not matter.
Not that arm day is not important, right? But I'm just saying, it's not making you money.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that's fantastic. And even if you do have a day job or a boss or whatever, I think you can still, revolve or try to focus that in on what you're doing and take care of that and everything you do outside of it too. If you have a side hustle, which most of us do, just make sure you're thinking about that. We can only spend 1 to 2 hours on it if you have a main job, but make sure that you're not trying to multitask the heck out of everything and make that smoothie like you're talking about earlier, but just do one thing on Monday, another thing on Tuesday. I think that's super fun experiment.
I love that.
Everybody should try it. All right, that's it. That was awesome. So where can people learn more about what you're doing, find you, website, social media, podcast, follow you on Instagram?
All of it.
All those selfies. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of it.
All of the selfies. It's mostly just selfies.
Okay, I'm looking right now and I see a duck. I don't see any selfies. I see a duck.
It was a goose.
A goose, yeah. Okay, I see a goose.
That is very true. That's very true. Where was I? I was in Alabama or something earlier this week, and this goose was this crazy goose. It thought it was a car. It just kept sitting in different parking spots. Like every time I left the hotel, it was in a different parking spot, and I was like, "This goose,
this goose
is pretty cool." Like, so he's famous now because he's on my Instagram.
That's true, yeah.
So Instagram, millennial.entrepreneur, pretty easy to find, and my website's gabriellebosche.com, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff about me and what I do, and you can check out my podcast there. My podcast is Up Next, where I get to interview up and coming millennial leaders, talking about what's next, what happens when we take over and we take charge.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was awesome. It went really well, I think our audience got
no
what's
I
that?
Loved it. It was awesome.
It was. I'm super excited about it. You can't I gotta be honest. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.